The gunshot echoed through Millbrook's dusty Main Street as Sheriff Corbin Voss kicked down the saloon door, his badge gleaming in the amber light of oil lamps. Blood pooled beneath the mahogany bar where Ezekiel Hartwell lay clutching his chest. His eyes fixed on the staircase where screams pierced the night. "Delphine!" Corbin roared, taking the stairs 3 at a time, his heart hammering against his ribs like a caged bird. He'd been too late to stop the poker game that had spiraled into violence, but he wouldn't be too late for her. The door to room 7 hung open, revealing overturned furniture and torn silk curtains. Delphine Rousseau stood pressed against the far wall, her emerald dress ripped at the shoulder, her copper hair wild around her face. But it wasn't fear in her storm-gray eyes, it was fury. "Get away from me, Corbin," she hissed, clutching a bloodied letter opener. "You don't understand what you've walked into." "Put that down, Del." His voice gentled as he holstered his Colt .45. "Hartwell's dead downstairs." "Ow! Whatever happened here? What happened is that my debt's been called in." She laughed bitterly, the sound cutting through him like winter wind. $3,000 to Montgomery Griswold, and since I can't pay, ... She gestured toward a leather-bound document on the dresser. "I've been sold." Corbin's blood turned to ice as he read the contract. Delphine Rousseau, formerly of New Orleans, now property of Jasper Blackthorne of Deadwood Creek. Payment. Services rendered for a period of 7 years, or until debt satisfaction. "This isn't legal," he whispered, but they both knew the truth. In territories where law bent to the will of wealthy men, papers like this might as well be carved in stone. "Blackthorne's men are coming for me at dawn." Delphine's voice cracked. "They'll drag me to his mining camp, and I'll disappear into those mountains like dozens of other girls." She met his eyes, and for a moment the hardened saloon girl fell. Away, revealing the scared woman beneath, his judges in his pocket. "Corbin, your badge means nothing against his gold." Thunder rumbled overhead as rain began pelting the windows. Corbin stepped closer, his hands trembling as he reached for her face. "Then we run. Tonight, before they come." "Run where?" She jerked away. "He owns half the territory. His reach stretches. From here to the Canadian border? I don't care if it stretches to hell itself." Corbin's voice turned rough with desperation. "I've loved you since the day you stepped off that stagecoach 2 years ago, Del. I won't let them take you." "Love," she laughed harshly. "You think love can stop what's coming? Blackthorne doesn't just want me for his bed, Corbin. He wants to break me, to prove that no one defies him and lives free." Her eyes blazed. "And he knows about us. Every stolen moment, every secret meeting he's been watching." The floorboards creaked in the hallway. Heavy boots, multiple sets. They'd come. Early. Corbin drew his gun as shadows moved past the doorway, but Delphine caught his wrist. "No," she whispered urgently. "If you kill his men, he'll have every reason to hunt us to the ends of the earth. There's another way, Del. I won't let them listen to me." Her fingers dug into his arm. "Blackthorne thinks he owns everything, but he doesn't know about the old mine shafts beneath Widow's Peak. My father was a surveyor before he died. I have his maps." She pressed a folded paper into his hand. "There's a passage that leads to the abandoned settlement at Raven's Hollow, where from there we can reach the railroad." Footsteps stopped outside the door. A gravelly voice called out, "Miss Rousseau, time to collect what's owed." Delphine's face hardened with resolve. "Take the back stairs down to the cellar. Behind the wine barrels, there's a tunnel that connects to the old church foundation. Wait for my signal. I'm not leaving you. You are if you want us both to live." She kissed him fiercely, tasting of whiskey and desperation. "Trust me, Corbin. I've been planning this longer than you know." The door exploded inward. 3 men, in black dusters, filled the frame, led by a scarred giant who smiled like a wolf. "Evening, Miss Rousseau. Name's Mordecai Kane. Mr. Blackthorne sent us to escort you to your new home." Corbin melted into the shadows of the adjoining room as Delphine stepped forward, her chin raised defiantly. "I need to gather my things." "All ready. Packed for you, darling." Kane gestured to his men, who advanced with coiled rope. Mr. Blackthorne was very specific about timeline. "Wait," Delphine's voice turned silky. "Jasper wants me undamaged, doesn't he? Untouched until he can claim his prize." She traced a finger along Kane's jaw. What he doesn't know won't hurt him. Kane's eyes darkened with lust. Boys, wait downstairs. Seems the lady wants to negotiate terms. As the door closed, Delphine moved to the window and lit the oil lamp, then blew it out once, twice, 3 times. The signal. In the cellar below, Corbin saw the flashes and began working his way through the tunnel system that honeycombed beneath Millbrook's oldest buildings. Now then, Kane breathed, reaching for Delphine's face. Let's discuss payment. The letter opener slid between his ribs like it was meant to be there. Kane's eyes widened in shock as Delphine twisted the blade, her face a mask of cold fury. That's for every girl who disappeared into Blackthorn's camps, she whispered, as Kane collapsed. In this, she grabbed his gun and put a bullet through his heart. It's for thinking you could own me. The shots brought his men running. Delphine was already climbing out the window onto the roof as bullets splintered the door frame behind her. She slid down the rain-slick shingles and dropped into the alley where Corbin waited with 2 horses. The maps, he said breathlessly, helping her mount. Did you get them? She patted the saddlebag. Everything we need. But Corbin, she caught his hand as thunder crashed overhead. Once we ride out of here, we can never come back. Are you ready to leave everything behind? His answer was to spur his horse forward into the storm-lashed night. They rode hard through sheets of rain that turned the mountain trails treacherous, their horses' hooves slipping on wet stone as they climbed toward Widow's Peak. Behind them, torches flickered in the distance. Blackthorn's men, summoned by gunfire and already giving chase. There, Delphine pointed through the downpour to a grove of lightning-struck pines. The mine entrance should be just beyond those trees. Corbin's horse stumbled on loose shale, nearly sending him tumbling into the ravine below. They were pushing too hard, but the alternative was capture on death. Blackthorn didn't forgive betrayal, especially when it cost him valuable property and his best enforcer. The mine shaft yawned before them like a mouth in the mountainside. Timber supports rotted and hanging at dangerous angles. Delphine dismounted and pulled a torch from her saddlebag, striking a match that hissed in the damp air. The horses can't make it through the narrow passages, she said, untying their supplies. We go on foot from here. These tunnels could collapse at any moment. Corbin studied the sagging timbers with a lawman's eye for danger. Your father's maps? How old are they? 15 years? She met his gaze steadily. But it's this, or face Kane's brothers, and they're worse than he was. As if summoned by her words, the distant thunder of hoofbeats echoed off the canyon walls. Their pursuers were gaining ground. They plunged into the tunnel's maw, leaving their horses to find their own way home. The torch cast dancing shadows on walls streaked with mineral deposits, and somewhere in the darkness ahead, water dripped. With metronomic persistence, the air grew thin and stale as they descended, following passages that branched and twisted through the mountain's heart. Tell me about these maps, Corbin said quietly, his voice echoing strangely in the confined space. How did your father come to survey these tunnels? Delphine's face was pale in the torchlight. He worked for Blackthorn's predecessor, a man named Cornelius Ashford, who owned the original mining claims. Father discovered that the mountain was honeycombed with natural caves and ancient mine workings, some dating back to Indian silver mines from decades before white settlers arrived. What happened to Ashford? Mysterious disappearance. His claims reverted to territorial authority, and somehow Blackthorn acquired them for a fraction of their worth. Her laugh was bitter. Same story as always, rich men eliminating competition. They reached a junction where 3 tunnels branched off into darkness. Delphine consulted her father's map, tracing routes with a trembling finger. Left passage leads to the old smelting works. Center goes to a dead end, where they hit an underground spring. Right should take us toward Raven's Hollow. A distant sound froze them, both voices echoing from the entrance tunnel. Blackthorn's men had found their trail. Move, Corbin whispered, and they ran. The right passage sloped downward, growing wider as they descended. Ancient mining equipment lay scattered in alcoves, rusted pickaxes, broken or carts, coils of rope that crumbled at a touch. But it was what they found in a wider chamber that made them both stop in horror. Bones, human bones, scattered across the floor like discarded toys. Dozens of skeletons, still wearing the remnants of mining clothes and women's dresses. Jesus. Corbin breathed. Dell, this is Ashford's people. Her voice was hollow. The miners who disappeared when the claims changed hands. And the women? She knelt beside a skeleton, wearing the tattered remains of a dance hall dress. The girls who vanished over the years. Blackthorn's been feeding bodies to these tunnels. For decades, the voices behind them grew louder, closer. We have to keep moving, Corbin said gently. But Delphine was studying her father's map with new understanding. No, she whispered, look at this. She pointed to notations in her father's careful handwriting. These aren't just survey marks. They're warnings. Father knew what Blackthorn was doing, and he mapped escape routes for anyone who might need them. The map showed a passage leading from this charnel chamber to a hidden exit near Raven's Halibut, also something else. A notation that made Delphine's blood run cold. Ashford's cache evidence of BC's crimes, sealed chamber beneath the eagle's nest. She looked up at Corbin with fierce determination. We're not just running anymore. What are you talking about? Corbin helped Delphine to her feet as the voices of their pursuers echoed closer through the tunnels. We need to get out of here before what? We spend our lives running. Delphine folded the map carefully, her jaw set with new resolve. My father didn't just map these tunnels, Corbin. He documented Blackthorn's crimes. All of them. And if that evidence still exists, then we could bring him down. The implications hit Corbin like a physical blow. But Del, even if we find this cache, who would believe us? Blackthorn owns judges, politicians. He doesn't own everyone. Delphine moved toward the passage that led deeper into the mountain. Federal marshals answer to Washington, not territorial corruption. And there's a new railroad commissioner coming through next month, someone clean, according to the newspaper reports. The sound of boots on stone grew distinct now. Multiple men moving with purpose through the upper tunnels. They ran again, following passages that seemed to lead ever deeper into the mountain's heart. The air grew warmer, and Delphine realized they were approaching an underground hot spring that her father had marked on his maps. The tunnel opened into a vast cavern lit by phosphorescent minerals and the walls a cathedral of stone that took their breath away. There, Delphine pointed to the far side of the cavern, where stone formations resembled a great eagle with outstretched wings. The eagle's nest. They picked their way across the cavern floor, stepping carefully around the steaming pools that bubbled up from deep within the earth. Behind the eagle formation, Delphine's torch revealed a narrow opening barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. Inside, they found Cornelius Ashford's final legacy. The hidden chamber was perfectly preserved, protected from moisture. By some quirk of geology, wooden crates lined the walls, and a desk sat in the center with papers scattered across its surface. But it was the far wall that made them both gasp photographs. Dozens of them pinned to boards like a madman's gallery. Pictures of mining camps where workers lived in squalor. Documents showing falsified safety reports. And worse, photographs of women, some recognizable as girls, who had disappeared from various towns across the territory. Each photo was labeled with a date and a location. My God, Corbin whispered, studying a photograph of a young woman chained to a wall in what looked like a mine shaft. This is ... double quotes systematic.
Delphine's
voice was deadly quiet. He's been trafficking women for years, using the mining claims as cover. Look at this. She held up a ledger showing payments to territorial officials. He's bought half the government. A shout echoed from the main cavern. Their pursuers had found the entrance. Take everything, Corbin said, stuffing documents into his coat. We'll sort through it later. But Delphine was studying her father's map with growing excitement. There's another way out. A passage that leads to an old mine shaft on the north face. It opens above Raven's Hollow. She traced the route with her finger. But Corbin, look at this notation. There's something else here, something my father called the nest egg. In the deepest corner of the chamber, behind a pile of mining equipment, they found a metal strongbox. Inside were bearer bonds worth $50,000, Ashford's insurance policy. meant to fund his escape before Blackthorn had him killed. Blood. Money, Delphine said, but she took the bonds anyway. We'll need resources if we're going to fight him properly. Voices grew louder in the main cavern. It's the sound of men arguing about which passage to take. This way Delphine led them to a crack in the chamber's rear wall that was barely visible unless you knew where to look. The passage to freedom. Bet. As they squeezed through the opening, Corbin caught her hand. Del, even if we escape, even if we get this evidence to the right people, Blackthorn will never stop hunting us. You know that, right? She smiled. And in that smile was something wild and dangerous. Then we'd better make sure we finish this before he finds us. The narrow passage led upward through natural rock formations, emerging finally into starlight near the ruins of Raven's Hollow. Behind them, angry voices echoed from the depths as Blackthorn's men discovered the empty chamber. They were free. But the real war was just beginning. Dawn broke gray and cold over Raven's Hollow as Delphine and Corbin huddled in the ruins of what had once been the settlement's general store. The ghost town sprawled before them in the pale light, false-fronted buildings with broken windows staring like empty eyes, paint peeling and wood warped by decades of mountain weather. The morning train to Denver stops at Miller's Junction, Corbin said, consulting his pocket watch. If we can reach the water tower by 9 o'clock? He looked up to find Delphine staring back toward the mountain where they'd emerged, her face set with grim determination. We're not taking any train, she said quietly. Not yet, Del. We have the evidence. Ashford's photographs, the ledgers, enough to hang Blackthorn 10 times over. Every minute we stay in this territory increases the risk. The risk to who? Her gray eyes flashed. To us? Or to the women still trapped in his camps? She pulled out one of the photographs, a girl who couldn't have been more than 16. Terror etched in every line of her face. How many more will disappear while we're riding trains to Denver and filing reports with federal marshals? Corbin studied the map she'd spread on a broken crate. What are you proposing? I know where his main operation is. Her finger traced a route through the mountains to a valley marked in red on her father's survey notes. Devil's Canyon. Blackthorn's been using the old Ashford silver mine as a base. It's remote, defensible, and the perfect place to hide what he's really doing. You want to attack a fortified position with dozens of armed men? Corbin's voice rose despite himself. Del, that's suicide. Is it? She met his gaze steadily. Or is it justice? A sound made them both freeze, the distant whistle of a train. But not from the direction of Miller's Junction. This whistle came from the north, from the private spur line that Blackthorn used to transport, or from his mountain claims. But as they watched from the ruins, it wasn't or cars that rolled past in the valley below. Passenger cars. Windows barred, guards riding the platforms between cars. Jesus, Corbin breathed. He's moving them, the women. Delphine's face went white as they counted the cars, 6 passenger compartments, each one capable of holding a dozen people. That's more than just his local operation. He's consolidating, bringing in girls from all his camps across the territory. Why now? Corbin wondered. But even as he asked, the answer became clear. Because we escaped. Because Kane is dead, and his operation is compromised. He's cutting his losses, moving his most valuable assets to somewhere even more remote. Delphine was already gathering their supplies, and we follow that train. On foot? Del, be reasonable. I'm being perfectly reasonable. Her voice cut like a blade, reasonable like every man who's looked the other way while women disappeared. Reasonable like every official who took Blackthorn's money and kept quiet. She shouldered her pack and started toward the train tracks. I spent 2 years in that saloon listening to rumors, tracking patterns, trying to understand how girls could just vanish without anyone caring enough to investigate. Well, now I know, and I'm done being reasonable. Corbin caught up with her. At the edge of the settlement, if we're doing this, we do it smart. No charging in with guns blazing. Agreed. She pulled out Ashford's bearer bonds. But first we need supplies and help. An hour's walk brought them to a homestead where smoke rose from the chimney and chickens pecked in the yard. The woman who answered their knock was middle-aged and weathered, but her eyes were sharp and kind. When Delphine explained that they were tracking criminals who preyed on young women, The woman who introduced herself as Temperance McBride invited them in without hesitation. "My daughter vanished 3 years ago," Temperance said as she served them coffee and biscuits. "Rode to town for supplies and never came home." Sheriff said she probably ran off with some cowboy, but Mercy wasn't that kind of girl. Her voice hardened. "I've been waiting for someone to care enough to ask the right questions." Within hours, word had spread through the scattered homesteads and mining camps of the region. By evening, they had a dozen volunteers, men and women, who had lost daughters, sisters, wives to Blackthorn's network. Farmers and miners who brought their own weapons and knowledge of the mountain trails. This is bigger than just us now, Corbin realized as they planned their approach to Devil's Canyon. "If we're wrong, if we fail, ... then we fail fighting," Delphine said simply. "But if we're right, if we can free even half those women and bring Blackthorn's empire crashing down, it'll be worth the risk." As night fell over the mountains, their small army began the trek toward Devil's Canyon and whatever waited in the darkness ahead, the assault on Devil's Canyon began at 3 in the morning under a moonless sky that hid their approach through the pine forest surrounding Blackthorn's stronghold. Delphine crouched behind a boulder at the canyon's rim, studying the mining complex spread below through a pair of borrowed field glasses. The main mine entrance was lit by torches, stationed at regular intervals along wooden walkways that connected various buildings, but it was the smaller structures that drew her attention, barracks with barred windows and the unmistakable silhouettes of women pressed against the glass. "Count," Corbin whispered from beside her. "More 43 guards visible, maybe more inside the mine itself." She passed him the glasses. "The women are being held in 3 separate buildings on the south side of the complex." Temperance McBride crawled up beside them, her face streaked with mud for camouflage. "My husband's demolition experience says those support timbers are the weak point," she murmured, pointing to the mine entrance. "They'll bring down the main shaft and anyone inside stays inside." Their plan was necessarily simple, given their limited numbers and equipment. Create diversions at multiple points to draw guards away from the prison barracks, free as many women as possible, and retreat to predetermined rally points in the forest. The evidence they'd gathered would mean nothing if they couldn't produce living witnesses to Blackthorn's crimes. "Remember," Delphine said to the assembled group, "we're not here for revenge. We're here for rescue and evidence. Anyone who wants to surrender gets the chance." But as they descended into the canyon, everything went wrong. A guard dog's bark shattered the pre-dawn quiet. Shouts erupted from the compound as torches flared to life. "It's a trap," someone hissed, but there was no turning back now. The women in those barracks were depending on them. Gunfire erupted from multiple directions. As Blackthorn's men poured out of hidden positions, they'd been expected. Someone had betrayed their plans. The North Barracks. Delphine shouted over the chaos, leading a group of volunteers toward the nearest prison building. Bullets whined off rocks around them as they ran, but they reached the structure and began working on the heavy wooden bars across the windows. Inside, faces pressed against the glass, young women, some barely out of childhood, their eyes wide with desperate hope. "Stand back," Delphine called, then used the butt of her rifle to smash the window. "Is this real?" whispered the first girl through the opening, a blonde who couldn't have been older than 17. "Are you really here to help us?" "As real as it gets, honey." "Can you climb?" They helped a dozen women escape through the window before the guards reached their position. A running gun battle erupted as they fought their way toward the tree line, the rescued women stumbling in the darkness. Some too weak from captivity to run, that's when Delphine saw him. Jasper Blackthorn stood on the porch of the main house, tall and lean in an expensive black coat, watching the chaos with cold amusement. Even from a distance, she could see his smile, the expression of a man who held all the cards. "Corbin," she called, but he was already moving toward the second barracks, leading another rescue team. She made her choice and turned toward Blackthorn's position. The mining magnate didn't retreat as she approached. Instead, he waited on his porch like a gracious host, receiving an expected guest. "Delphine Rousseau," he said as she climbed the steps, her rifle trained on his chest, right on time. Though I must say, your rescue operation seems to be going rather poorly. It's over, Blackthorn. We have evidence of everything: the trafficking, the murders, the corruption. Federal marshals are already on their way. He laughed, a sound like winter wind through dead leaves. Are they? How interesting. Because according to my sources, no federal involvement has been requested. In fact, Sheriff Voss hasn't filed any reports at all about his recent ... activities. The implications hit her like a physical blow. If Corbin hadn't contacted the federal authorities, if this rescue mission was all they had... See, my dear, I've been in this business far too long to be brought down by a saloon girl and a lovesick sheriff. Blackthorn's smile widened. Did you really think your little raid was a surprise? I've been tracking your movements since you left Millbrook. The gunfire around the compound was dying down. Either their people were winning, or... However, Blackthorn continued, I'm prepared. To be reasonable. Return my property, the women you've stolen, and the documents you found in Ashford's little hiding place. And I'll let you and the sheriff ride away. Continue this foolishness, and everyone you brought here dies, including the women you're trying to save. Delphine's finger tightened on the trigger. One shot could end it all, but from the darkness behind Blackthorn's house, a new voice spoke. I wouldn't do that if I were you, miss. She turned to see Corbin walking toward them, his hands raised, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. Behind him came a man she'd never seen before, tall, scarred, wearing the badge of a territorial marshal. Allow me to introduce Marshal. Wade Stockton, Blackthorn said pleasantly, an old friend and business associate. You're too late, Blackthorn, Delphine said, surprising herself with how steady her voice remained despite the gun barrel pressed against Corbin's skull. Even if you kill us, the evidence is already on its way to Washington. Marshal Stockton laughed harshly. What evidence? Some old photographs and a dead man's journals? He shoved Corbin forward. Federal authorities don't investigate on the word of wanted criminals. Wanted? Corbin's eyes flashed to Delphine. What's he talking about? Blackthorn smiled like a satisfied cat. Oh, didn't you know? Miss Rousseau here is wanted for the murder of 3 men in Millbrook, my employee, Mordecai Kane and 2 of his associates. Marshal Stockton has warrants for both of you. The trap was complete. Even if they survived this confrontation, they'd spend their lives running from the law instead of pursuing justice. But as Stockton reached for his handcuffs, a rifle shot cracked through the canyon air. The corrupt marshal spun and dropped. Clutching his shoulder as blood spread across his shirt. Step away from them, Blackthorn. The voice came from the canyon rim above, where Temperance McBride stood silhouetted against the stars, a smoking Winchester in her hands. And you might want to turn around. Behind Blackthorn's house, torches bobbed through the trees as riders emerged from the forest. Not his mentees wore the blue uniforms of the U.S. Cavalry, led by an officer whose insignia gleamed in the firelight. Captain Morrison, 8th Cavalry, the officer announced as his men surrounded the compound. Acting on orders from the Department of Justice to investigate reports of criminal activity in this territory. Blackthorn's composure finally cracked. This is impossible. My sources in Washington. Your sources failed to mention that one of your victims was the daughter of a federal judge, Captain Morrison said coldly. Or that the president himself has taken a personal interest in cleaning up territorial corruption. As cavalry troopers secured the area and began releasing the remaining captive women, Delphine learned the truth. Temperance McBride's lost daughter hadn't vanished. Randomly, she'd been traveling to visit her grandfather, Judge Harrison McBride of the Federal Circuit Court. When Mercy McBride disappeared, her grandfather had quietly launched his own investigation, using federal resources to track the trafficking network. The documents you recovered from Ashford's cache, Captain Morrison explained as Blackthorn and his surviving men were led away in chains, provided the final pieces of evidence we needed. Mrs. McBride has been working undercover for months, gathering intelligence and waiting for the right moment to strike. The homestead, the other volunteers. Delphine began. All federal operatives are trusted allies. Temperance confirmed, pulling off her muddy disguise to reveal the fine clothes of an educated woman beneath. We've been building this case for 2 years, but we needed someone with inside knowledge of Blackthorn's operation. When you and Sheriff Voss escaped with Ashford's evidence, you gave us the opportunity we'd been waiting for. As dawn broke over Devil's Canyon, the full scope of the rescue operation became clear. Over 60 women had been freed from various holding facilities throughout the complex. Some had been captives for years, others only recently taken. All would need time to heal, but they were alive and free. "What happens now?" Corbin asked, as they watched the last of Blackthorn's empire being dismantled by federal agents. "Now, you have a choice," Captain Morrison said. "Sheriff Voss, your actions, while illegal in the strictest sense, were taken to prevent greater crimes. The federal government would be honored to offer you a position as a territorial marshal if you're interested in continuing this kind of work." Corbin looked at Delphine, who smiled and took his hand. We both would be." 6 months later, Marshal Corbin Voss and Deputy Marshal Delphine Voss stood on the steps of the new federal courthouse in Denver, watching as Jasper Blackthorn was led away to begin a life sentence in federal prison. The trials had been swift and decisive, with overwhelming evidence and dozens of witnesses. Justice had finally been served.
Ow.
"Any regrets?" Corbin asked as they walked away from the courthouse, their badges gleaming in the afternoon sun. Delphine smiled, her hand resting on the small but noticeable curve of her belly where their first child grew. "Only that it took so long to find you." They mounted their horses and rode west toward their next assignment, tremors of corruption in the silver camps of Colorado that needed investigation. Behind them, the courthouse bell tolled the hour, its bronze voice carrying across the mountains like a promise that justice, however delayed, would always find its way home. In the end, the sheriff had tried to save her life, and she had saved his soul in return. Together, they would ensure that no one else would face the darkness alone.